I don't mind sloppy. I think sloppy is actually an attribute in rock and roll, but it was not caring sloppy. It wasn't because he couldn't quite do it sloppy.
Well, a very good morning to you all, everybody. I'm Michael Taylor. I'm the editor of an online publication called thebusinessdesk.com. I've been a journalist in and around Manchester since the year 2000. Before that, I worked doing the kind of thing, I always wanted to be the kind of writer that John is. I started out writing about music, fashion, art, that sort of thing in Australia. I thought that would land me a job on the Face or ID when I moved back to the UK. It didn't, so I ended up writing about supercomputers. But then I found an industry I liked writing about, which was the TV business through the 90s, which was a great time to do that. But I came back into journalism a couple of years ago, and the thing I like doing more than anything else, more than like doing long form writing, more than doing tedious roundtables with housing providers, is interviewing people in front of amazing audiences. And that's what I've been given the opportunity to do with John today. I actually first started out doing a fanzine in 1982. And one of the people I rang up when I was doing my fanzine was the editor of a fanzine down the road from me in Lancashire, in Blackpool, who lived on Ankersholme Lane.
Wow, what a memory.
Yeah, yeah. And he was also from a band called The Membranes, and he is our special guest today, John Robb. How about that? So John, we've got loads of different things to talk about since the last time, but just tell us what you're working on right at the moment, because it will blow people's minds.
Well, I'm always doing a lot of things all at once. I still do my website, Loud and War, but because of all that Oasis stuff that was going off recently, and I did that interview with Noel Gallagher. He only did one interview this year, and it's about the Definitely Maybe remix album. You know, the original two albums didn't come out. Yeah. So he got me in to do the interview, and I said, well, if you do the interview, I don't want all the slagging off of your brother, really, which is funny, you know, which is good, isn't it? Because their ping pong has been really entertaining for 10 years. But I just want something slightly different. So he dead nice about Liam, and he said Liam's got a great voice and he's got a great style. And there's a lot of stuff that didn't go out in that interview. He's been super nice about him. And I was thinking, oh, that's really good. And also I wanted it to be, if possible, to be more of a glimpse of him as a person, because there's a very 2D tabloid version of him. And mainly from London, the London media and the South, where, you know, because in the North we're all a bit thick, aren't we? We're all a bit daft, you know. That's how they portray us, isn't it? And that's how Oasis got it. We're actually, both Noel and Liam are very smart, very nuanced, and it's very multi-layered. There's a lot more going on there. So I want to get a bit more, because I knew him, Noel, before Oasis, before the Spiral Carpets, when he's just a kid turning up at gigs. Right. So I wanted that version to come out of the interview, which I think it did. And then they reformed 3 days later. I mean, the interview was done 3 months before. They hadn't reformed it, because when they did reform, I did message the management and say, you've reformed, you didn't even tell me. He said, but they hadn't. They still weren't speaking at that point. So that's quite interesting.
Do you think you played a role in catalysing?
Yeah, well, I reformed, yeah.
No, that mental shift in Noel's mind, that actually my brother's all right. He's got a lot of qualities.
You can't say that didn't happen, but I think there was machinations to reform before that, from February onwards this year, with management and stuff. But it happens every year. They book the venues and wait for, well, basically Noel to decide whether he's going to do it or not. So I think that was going on. I didn't reform them, but I think it maybe reframes the situation slightly.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Which is nice. But then from that, because I had to do all the telly, because they couldn't think of anybody else to get. So it was on every single thing.
You have actually filmed for Channel 4 News in the street outside, weren't you?
I did about 4 out there.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And what's the significance of an interview about Oasis filmed in the street outside here for the benefit of the young people?
Well, they used to rehearse in the Boardwalk, which is the next building on, which is now an office, isn't it? Next door to us, actually. Yeah. So they've been there all day, rehearsing Eye in the Walrus over and over again for like 6 or 7 hours. And we used to think, God, that's mad. But then, of course, it paid off. They actually did it properly, didn't they?
Yeah.
We rehearsed once for a whole tour. And they rehearsed every single day. I remember going in the room, the room, it had all the graffiti on the wall, a little Union Jack painted on the wall and that, and all the Man City graffiti everywhere. Right. When they redid them offices, I remember going in, when they done them all up, because they said, do you want to come down? Because that blue plaque, which is a bit naff, that plaque, but I had to unveil that plaque. So before, part of that was going in, look at the offices. We did do a nice job of doing it all up, but they completely gutted and redid the Oasis room. They said, that's a bit mad. You could have just put a plastic sheet over the graffiti. It'd be like some kind of primitive Banksy, wouldn't it?
Yes, it would, wouldn't it? Yeah.
But because of that, I've ended up having to write a book I was writing the book, and I was actually ironically writing the Be Here Now chapter.
Wow.
It was just the most coked up, mad chapter. Once you're in that place, you can't get out again, can you? So my head, I mean, I don't take coke, but my head is full of that kind of world of like completely excessive rock and roll madness, which is actually quite interesting to look at from a different perspective. Because when that record came out, the expectations were really high, weren't they? It got really good reviews, remember?
I did, yeah.
And everyone said it's the best album of the decade, and within 2 weeks, everyone said it's the worst album of the decade, which is odd, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
And then people said it's too long, it's too excessive, it's too coked up, and even Noel Gallagher says that. But when you go back and listen to it, because I'm doing the chapters, so I've listened to it over and over again, it's actually a really good record. And I like the way the songs are really long and really ridiculous and really over the top.
Yeah. I still maintain that All Around the World is one of their best, definitely my top 5 Oasis songs.
Great song, and it's and that 4-5 minute coda at the end, which everyone says if they just cut that off, it'd be a great pop song. Yeah, it would, but something about that ridiculousness of it and the hypnotic mantra at the end of it is actually really good. It's a psychedelic record made on cocaine, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. So talk about how the circumstances came about. You said you've known Noel historically. How did the circumstances come about that you got to do the interview with him this year?
I think, well, there's a few things. I mean, I'm not always in touch, but every now and then I'll just text him and say, you know, how's it?
You have his number?
Yeah. No, not because he's like massive, because there's loads of people that appeared in bands that nobody's ever heard of and still in touch with. He's just somebody else who's in a band. I was in a band. It's just that his band happened to be way more successful than everyone else's. But I never think of that. I just still think of him as being this really good lad who did a good band, you know, and that's. But there's bands I can mention now, you go, what's he going on about? When I still love them bands as well. It's not, people are only interested in a book about them because they will sell books. I mean, I quite happily write a book about a band no one's ever heard of. I have done. I've written books about bands. I spend most of my life writing about stuff nobody really cares about. So we're always in touch. And then he did this really good Spotify playlist about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, full of like really obscure post-punk tracks. I thought, yeah, that's the kid I remember from the gigs, because he would go to everything. So I just texted him and said, I really like that playlist. That's kind of you, isn't it? I can see that. It's not just two Beatles rock, and I love the Beatles, but it was also like Section 25 and ACR and the Chameleons and stuff that wasn't really expecting him to like. But I knew he liked that stuff. So we just kept in touch. Then he did a video for the last solo single at New Century Hall. I was in New Century Hall yesterday, actually. But so he did a video in there, and they got me to play the part of the psychotic barman in it. Right. So we were just kind of a bit more in touch recently. Then he asked me to do that interview. Then the whole thing went kind of crazy. Yeah.
Right. And how is he? What sort of character is he to sit down and talk with?
Oh, he's great. He's nice, just normal. Normal, of course, normal. Everyone's normal, aren't they? Yeah. But a massive music head, still a massive music head. So it just instantly gets into the little tiny bits of music. And do you remember this record or that record? What do you think of this and that? So kind of conversations I have most of the day with people I bump into, really. Yeah.
So could we get a quick show of hands before we go down this Oasis rabbit hole? Who's got tickets to see them next year? Okay, great. And did you have to pay a very hefty price due to the dynamic pricing?
Thank you.
No, you did. Yeah, good. Which one are you going to?
Eaton Park on the 20th.
Yeah, nice.
This is another kind of myth, isn't it, the dynamic pricing thing, because people are endlessly going about how Oasis invented this new ticketing system. You go, they didn't start it. Nick Cave, Susie Sue's doing it. It's been going on for 20 years. And it's only because they're so well known that the spotlight really went on it. You know, I don't like dynamic pricing. I don't agree with dynamic pricing, but they didn't start dynamic pricing, did they? It's just another. SJM didn't start dynamic pricing either. You know, I mean, most of the acts don't even use. I mean, SJM's Simon Moran is the big
we'll talk
promoter.
About that in a moment.
He's just over there, actually. Yeah. But it's just, and they use it and everything now. Someone was telling me, because I had to go and do a whole bunch of TV stuff about that as well. So I found out about dynamic pricing. Yeah. And there's a thing in Europe which is going to bring into shops in the UK now, which is going to bring dynamic pricing into a shop. So you buy a loaf of bread in the morning, it's in mid-morning when no one's in the shop, it's about, X amount of money. You go at 5 o'clock when you're in a rush to go home, you'll tip the price with dynamic pricing without you noticing. So that's why they've got all those tills there, because you don't really notice the price on a till. You just shove it all down, half asleep, buy it and leave. They're going to fluctuate the prices without you checking. So it's everywhere. It's already everywhere, isn't it? Hotels, trains, they do it, and it's creepy, and it's another example of disaster capitalism.
The thing with hotels, right? So if you pay like 500 quid to go and stay at the Radisson Hotel on a normal night, you've got more money than sense for a start. But, but that's dynamic pricing that's driving that, because maybe United are at home or there's a concert at one of the arenas. But like on a Monday night, you could go and treat yourself and stay there for 120 quid. But there isn't that flip with the Oasis tickets, is there? There aren't some cheaper tickets on another night. There might be for other concerts.
That's because, well, I guess if you were someone who's very pro dynamic pricing, you would argue that every single gig is a Saturday night high demand gig, isn't it? But I think the European gigs would be cheaper because they were big there, but not as big. So the trick would be to wait for European dates, which would be like you could have a weekend in Rome for cheaper than you could have a weekend in Manchester, which is how it is these days, isn't it? And go to the gig and stay in a hotel, isn't it? Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit more about Oasis, and then we'll move on to some other things about Manchester and music and some of the amazing things that you've been doing in your life most recently as well. So do you think the gigs are going to be good?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I mean it's different now going to big gigs. I remember when bands 30 years ago when bands reformed, it's a bit weird. Hardly ever reformed then, did they? And some bands weren't very good at it. So remember the Velvet Underground reformed and they played Glastonbury, and it wasn't very good, was it? They were a band that was built to play in small venues. They weren't really a big venue thing. Lou Reed didn't really want to do it. It was a bit like, I don't mind sloppy. I think sloppy is actually an attribute in rock and roll, but it was not caring sloppy. It wasn't because he couldn't quite do it sloppy. So there's often like a reformed band, you go, oh God, please don't do it. But now people worked out how to do it. And also the technology is really good now. And it's, like going to festivals in the 80s, how bad the sound was. If it was slightly windy, the sound would blow away, wouldn't it? Whereas now you go to like Glastonbury and the weather generally at festivals is awful because we fuck the climate up, but the sound is good, isn't it? So it's like one thing's down and one thing's up, isn't it? So, and also bands know there's so much at stake, they don't want to ruin it. And also there's a lot of little cheats you can do. There's a lot of, I'm not saying Oasis do this, going to do this, but a lot of big bands now when the singer's voice is gone, because over 50, as you can tell, like the voice gets a bit croaky, you lose a lot of bits of it. People sing along to a backing track of themselves. You can't hear it in the mix, but they're singing along with themselves to fill in the cracks, aren't they? So, but I don't technically agree that I don't mind a bad voice. When you hear a Bob Dylan record now and his voice is absolutely knackered, but he sounds completely brilliant, doesn't it? He sounds like a crazy old dude from the top of a mountain, doesn't it? And that's what you want from an 84-year-old. You want the World War knackered wisdom, don't you? Yeah. You don't want a pristine, beautiful voice. It's like when people go about Paul McCartney's voice. And I saw McCartney at Glastonbury, and there's a couple of songs where his voice wasn't as good in a 2-hour set, and you're thinking, he was 81 then or 80 or something. You're thinking he's actually standing up for 2 hours. Most people my age don't stand up. They get out of a chair and kind of go, oh my God. And he's actually doing a gig which is very stressful, even if everyone in the crowd, in fact, it's more stressful the crowd love you, you've got more to lose. And you got to sing full on for a whole set. I mean, and he did it, which I think is quite remarkable, really, isn't it?
So he's playing the Court Live Arena later this year, sold out, dynamic pricing. I don't know whether it applied or not, but
probably would, because it's that thing that people didn't realise. Nobody ever heard of this till Oasis, had they? But it's been going on for ages. In a way, you could argue that at least they put the spotlight on it, so everyone's kind of aware of the tricks. Yeah.
So, so I mentioned their Court Live. Bruce Springsteen's playing Court Live Arena, the only arena gig he's playing in the whole of the UK, which may or may not be the best setting to see an artist of Bruce Springsteen's stature. What did you make of the Co-op Live opening in Manchester, and have you been yet?
I've actually been. I've been so busy. I've not had a chance to go yet, but everyone I know has been, so it's absolutely amazing inside.
It is, Who's been to the Co-op Live Arena? Yeah, good.
People say the sight lines are brilliant, the sound is good. I mean, which is great. Also, I love that Manchester's got 2 arenas because everyone complains about everything in Manchester. We don't need 2 arenas. One's too many. Blah blah blah. It's like people in the city can't get their head around the fact that it's a major city in Europe. It's one of the main 10 cities in Europe now. It's not a backwater. When they used to call it a provincial city, I hate that term. Like it's the empire, with the last bits of the empire. This far-flung village up here, with a couple of mills in it, where it rains all the time. That's what they kind of think, isn't it?
Well, it definitely rains all the time.
They did this morning. It's probably stopped now, isn't it? So, but now, why can't we have 2 arenas? And I think the more we talked about this last night, New Century Hall. Manchester's got about 50 venues in the centre, isn't it? It's like insane, isn't it? Like in the 80s, when I was going to those gigs, we started to go out to gigs, there's about 5 venues in town. The Boardwalk just there, the 2 internationals, the university, and a couple of others, and that was it. You'd have no idea that within 30 years there'd be like more venues. There's actually like this kind of the story that gets perpetuated is that there's less venues and they're closing all the time. I don't think it's easy running a venue.
No.
And there's certain things that could get changed, like the VAT rules, etc. And they do need support and they do need help, but there's more venues than ever. And Manchester's got way more venues than it used to have. And they all work. And I think the more things you open in Manchester, the more people come here as well. That's the thing, because the people from New Century Hall last night were saying they're always a little worried, if there's too much on, because their competitors are the Ritz and Albert Hall. But I was just saying, like, if you have gigs on all three the same night, they're pretty well all sold out, aren't they? Because I'm pretty often at a gig and I'm out most nights at gigs. I'm thinking, oh God, I'm missing this because there's so much on. You're at one thing and there's something round the corner, which is not like London where you have to it's a major expedition to the side of town, isn't it? There's literally next door there's something you've forgotten about that was on that you really want to see, isn't it?
So you mentioned New Century Hall. I think in the last year, the best gig I've been to was the Coral playing there. I thought the sound was amazing. The atmosphere was incredible. It felt the right size. Maybe it's just because I'm an old person of a certain age, but that's the kind of the comfort. I grew up seeing gigs at the Great Hall at Lancaster University.
I used to go to gigs there because, Blackpool, where I grew up, nobody ever played Blackpool. Which is weird, isn't it? You think Britain's #1 showbiz town will have loads of gigs in it. We used to have to go to Lancaster, but we couldn't get to Lancaster. It was only 15 or 16. So I used to hire a bus. Can you imagine hiring a bus when you're 15? I mean, is that legal? Yeah. The bus company just say, yeah, 50 quid. Right. And when you used to charge £1 the ticket to get on the bus and back. And the money we made out of that, we bought all the band's gear with, actually. Wow. When we worked out what you need to buy, because we had no idea what we were doing. Because I always talk about this in my talks. The first gig we played, we got a band together. Well, I formed a band because I didn't know how you form bands, but in punk, the whole thing was so brilliant. This is the great thing about punk, which I think is probably part of what this talk is really. It's like, it was so empowering, you had to go and do it anyway. So if you want to be in a band, you just go form one. But you didn't go to a college to learn how to be in a band. You just go, right, I'm a band now, so what do I do next? I went up the road and my mate, who used to listen to John Peel, was so you could be the guitar player because it's kind of arty. We went to buy a guitar and we got it from Oxfam because we didn't know that, we didn't even know there was music shops. So we got this guitar, it had 4 strings on it. And we're looking at it going, doesn't look quite right now, but it must be right. We asked the woman, the old lady behind the counter, who was 50, and she seemed like
old lady of 50,
insanely old then. And she said, well, that's right, because she didn't know either. So we took that home, and with all the machine heads on the ends, which we didn't know were called machine heads, we put them in a row because we didn't know that's tuning up. We just thought they look a bit wonky, these. And then we got a bass and did the same. We got a bass from Woolworths, where the Woolworths, when we used to go and ask for the Sex Pistols, God Save the Queen, because they wouldn't sell it to you because it was banned. And it was like number 2 in the charts, and the gap in the charts, it went 5, 4, 3, gap 1. So you go and go, have you got Sex Pistols? And they go, and they wouldn't even be able to answer the question because it was such an outrageous record, The Work of the Devil. But they had a bass and a K bass, a Woolworths K, and I bought that, put machine heads in a row. And then we found the 14-year-old kid said he got 10 quid for Christmas, said, you're the drummer. So we got this toy kit, and then we did our first gig like that. Amazing. And we were so out of tune, and we had one bass line, bom, 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 bom. And it's really hard to play. I don't know if everyone plays guitar, but the first few weeks when you play, it's really hard to bend your fingers onto the frets and to get to go down to the next one, you kind of go. And that's how we played the gig. And I've never sung in a mic before, never plugged in an amp. I plugged in the amp and go, fuck, that's really loud, that. And then we started, and singing was just going into mic going, whoa, like that. And that was how we played. And it sounded terrible, but it's probably the best gig I'll ever play because it was so pure, because it was just so inspired by going to do this thing. And we were terrified, but we did it anyway, and I think that to me, that was a revolution in punk. And that's the same thing writing, because someone brought a fanzine to school. I looked at the fanzine, thought, wow, you can make your own magazines. Yeah. So somebody's dad was a printer, and he said, I'll photocopy these.
What's yours called?
ROX, ROX, yeah. So we did that for years, and that's how we learned to do it. We just went in and did it, and I've always done everything I've done in my life, I do it like that. You just go in, and if it doesn't work, life's short, and it just really doesn't matter, because I got so into the universe and the concept, because I know all the people from CERN now, and the idea of the universe is so insane, and we're the tiniest little crumb in a really irrelevant galaxy on the edge of the universe that nothing in the universe gives a toss about. It's just like, when you realise that, nothing is scary, is it? Because nothing actually really matters, does it?
Doesn't.
No, it really doesn't. The space is eternal, it's full of universes, and we're just one of zillions of universes, and we're a crumb inside that. Yeah. So that actually, to me, that makes you really concentrate on the moment, and it makes your life better, doesn't it? Yeah.
Brilliant. So I'm concentrating on this moment. This rabbit hole we went down. I started with New Century Hall, right? Great venue. You've seen
Oh, New
gigs
Century
there,
Hall
right?
is amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
And they've done a great job.
Do go there.
I mean, I did a video. No, actually, I'm mixing it up now. This is what happens now. I did a video in Albert Hall. Think about this. I went to a gig at Albert Hall the other night. Did anyone go to St. Vincent the other night? Yeah, it's great, wasn't it? I mean, yeah. That bit where she hit the guitar player on the head with the guitar. She did this thing, she jumped to the crowd, but at that gig, she climbed up into the stalls, came down again, put her guitar back on, and she turned round and she smacked the guitar player really hard by mistake on the head. And the whole crowd, you hear the whole crowd go, woo, like that. Yeah. But I remember going in there in 1985 to make a video when it's full of dead pigeons, as well, I can remember. There were hundreds of them. And it's got an organ at the back behind the stage with a bass note wide. There's a little door, and I went in, you can climb inside. I think so. I'm doing a gig there in December, so I'm going to go and see if you can still get inside the bass pipe.
Yeah, you've got to.
But New Century Hall, they've done a great job of that, haven't they? It's amazing because it's really... it's that part of town. I mean, I love the buildings around there, but it used to be quite dead, doesn't it? But now it's quite vibe. It's got a little square outside. The cafe bit was really packed and stuff, and still people complain. Oh, the room down there was so much better around there years ago. It was dead. There was nothing there, was there? You know, why can't Manchester have stuff to do, good stuff? Yeah.
So you touched on we touched on a point about the whole Lancaster University stuff, the DIY ethos. A lot of you guys all of you guys, I think, are freelancers of one description or another. The Lancaster University thing, I think, is a story worth telling that not many people probably realise. It didn't just happen because bands suddenly decided, yeah, we're going to go there. It went there because two guys, Barry Lucas being one of them, the entertainment officer at the student union at Lancaster University, got on the phone. He got on the phone and he said, I've noticed you're playing Glasgow, Liverpool, Manchester, Birmingham. Why don't you stop off in Lancaster? You know, it was his initiative that did that.
Which is brilliant, isn't it?
Yeah.
But also bands did long tours then. Bands would do 60-day tours. So nowadays bands would do 4 or 5 dates, you know, of that. You know, so bands like Ramones, Stranglers, all the punk bands played there. Went to all those gigs. But now,
who did you see?
All those bands, saw everything in there, yeah. But those bands now would do European tours. They wouldn't do so many British dates. So it'd be a whole European tour. But some of the other days going about this, like, it's a shame bands don't do all these places like Lancaster or Northampton was going, but you'd end up with a 300-day tour because you'd be doing all the Lancaster, Northampton in Europe as well on top of that. It's 30, 40, 50 years ago. It's a different model, isn't it? It's changed, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has, yeah.
But the gigs are, do you remember how violent those gigs were? I always think this is funny. You know, when people moan about people using mobile phones to take pictures of gigs, oh, it's really terrible. It's not like back in the day. You think back in the day at punk gigs, it was a fight, massive fight, wasn't it? It was like Lancaster versus Preston versus Blackpool, skinheads versus punks. And you're going, I don't even know what side they're meant to be on. when Buzzcocks played Blackpool, there's a massive fight. Those been fighting. And this is the best piece of crowd control I've ever seen. Pete Shelley went up to Mike. Pete Shelley, probably one of the greatest songwriters they came to Manchester. He was bisexual, quite camp. But in the punk days, that was like quite a novelty. Yeah. And he went up to Mike and he goes, "Can you stop fighting for your Uncle Peter?" And and the whole crowd was so ashamed. They all stopped fighting.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that. One of the first gigs I went to, I was a very shy 13-year-old up there on the balcony looking down with absolute horror at this melee that opened up, and it was Paul Weller. So I saw the Jam on the Setting Suns tour, and Paul Weller said, "If you want to fucking fight, fuck off outside."
Which was the usual line that people used, wasn't it? Or they would say, "If you want to fight, go to the football," didn't they? Yeah. Yes, they did. But it's the fight. But it's mad. So last thing was quite funny when people just moan about why people always got the mobile phones up thing, which it doesn't bother me at all. I think it's fine. You know, if people go to a gig, the people always sort of complain about people talking at gigs. That's weird as well. I think the gigs I went to, talking would be like very civilized.
Yeah. So, did you know that the last ever gig at the Lancaster University Great Hall was New Order?
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
Well, but
and then the university just sort of shut the whole thing down, and Barry moved on. He's written a book about it when Rock went to college.
Oh, is it? I'll have to get that.
There's a very good chapter in the book about Area Records, the greatest record shop in the history of mankind. Written by me. But you remember Area Records? They used to sell your fanzine.
Yeah.
Which is how, you know.
Yeah. Well, we used to get... Well, I mean, mate, eventually, when he's about 17, got a car so we could drive around distributing our fanzine around all the little shops everywhere. Yeah.
Brilliant. It's those networks, wasn't it, around the north of England that
Yeah, I actually don't think it really changes that much. I think it speeds up because the internet sped all that up. Well, then you'd have to physically go to somewhere to make that communication. We're endlessly writing letters. I remember that, I remember speaking to people like Crass, and Crass were like an anarcho punk band. Quite an amazing story, actually. But they used to have they've got really big. They would sell 100,000 records. But on Thursdays was their letter writing days. So they'd all sit in their squat, which is an amazing squat out in the countryside, with a big pile of stamps and letters, and reply to every single letter that got written to them. And there's hundreds and hundreds of letters, and there's about 8 of them, and they'd share out all the letters and answer them all. So we would do like a mini version of that. So you write back to everybody that ever wrote to you. Yeah, but now it's just all an email, isn't it? So it's quicker.
Yeah.
So it's just the whole thing sped up, isn't it? So like a website now, like my website's just a digital fanzine.
Yeah. So when did you talk to us about setting up Louder Than War?
What did that? It's probably 15 years ago. Set that up because I was writing for the websites, but so many things I want to write about. They couldn't possibly write about all that stuff. They just couldn't get it in, so I started just doing my own. So
it's like starting a band, starting a collective.
You learn as you go along. I had a vague idea to do it. It's quite different websites then as well, because in fact, it was actually easier in a sense because to lay it out, because you would just you could copy and paste the HTML off all the websites, which is very fanzine because it was cut and paste. Because fanzines were often you just cut all the things up and stuck them back together. I think punk culture was cut and paste culture. It was just grabbing all the bits of punk culture, put it back together in a different order that you liked, And I think so. The HTML thing was no weird thing to me. It's just and you put it all in, and you press a button, and you go, "Wow, fuck, that looks quite good." Or if a bit was wrong, you just go back in and take it out. Because I still don't know anything about coding, but I could just work it out by cutting and pasting in there. But now it's much more complex, isn't it? So now I have to get somebody to help me, which I didn't need to do in the first place. Yeah.
So tell everybody about where the name Louder Than War comes from.
Well, it's this Manic Street Preachers did a gig in Cuba, and Fidel Castro went to the gig, which is quite mad when you think about it, isn't it? And he went backstage, and they said, "Oh, sorry, it was a bit loud." And it's a great picture of him because Fidel Castro was about 6'8". He's like this massive guy, and they're all quite small apart from Nicky, the bass player.
Welsh.
and they're all looking up at him like that, and he looks like a giant. And he goes, "Loud, it is not louder than war," which is such a great, kind of cool thing to say. They don't like the idea that music is louder than war. Of course, in real life, it's not, is it? I mean, humans prefer having a war than, don't they, to go into a gig? Although the punk gigs were like both, weren't they?
Brilliant. So you've interviewed lots of people and written loads of great pieces and reviews. It's a go-to website if you're a music lover. Is John's website, Louder Than War. Can't recommend it enough. But that's also led to you doing so many different books. You talked briefly at the beginning about doing an Oasis book at the moment based on your 20,000 words that you've already got as a head start from your interview with Noel.
Yeah, another interview I did 10 years ago. Yeah.
So to pull
the interview I did the other week, I can't use that. This is like modern times for you, isn't it? So because you get paid to do it by the record, by the bands, by the management,
right? And
I don't have any rights to it, so I can't actually even mention I did that interview in my book, which is really weird, isn't it? Because this is something that probably affects people in here.
Yeah.
But there's a really big rights grab going on everywhere now.
Wow.
So if you use a photographer's photograph, and if you put somebody's photograph on your site, which you took off a Wikipedia page, and you put it on there without knowing about this, say 15 years ago, whatever, you get charged 800 quid now, and you haven't got 800 quid. So that's going on. And also the other way around, for photographers, when they go to gigs, they have to sign these insane contracts. So the St. Vincent gig, we didn't do any pictures of that because her management have a contract where she owns all the pictures and you're not allowed to use them apart from the ones using for a gig, but she can use them if she wants somewhere else. And it's like, so there's a big rights grab going on everywhere. Yeah. So what people actually own. And this is going to accelerate when you get to AI as well, isn't it?
Yeah, isn't it?
Because it's all about the image. Because in 20 years' time, all those gigs we're talking about now, you'll be able to go and see again, but it'll all be AI, and it will seem more real than the first gig you went to in the first place. They're probably even AI the audience having a riot. But in the ABBA thing, I think in 30 years' time, people look back on the ABBA gig, the gig, the thing they do in London as being the game-changing moment in pop culture of our times, because I think in 20, 30 years' time, the Rolling Stones will be touring with only Keith Richards being the only surviving member. Still with them. And you'll be able to go to the gig, probably pick the era of the Stones you want to go and see. Wow. And the only thing the gigs will have, it'll be a shared experience with the human beings in a room, because we still want that bit. The thing on the stage, it'd be completely AI'd up, but look more realistic than real people. Because even at this point now, we're very primitive AI. it's like you go, wow, you could do that. I did the last book I did was a history of goth, which is a massive book, and I did the audio version. It took me 4 months because it's really hard in an audio book. You're going to read an hour of stuff a day before your mouth starts going really numb.
But you talk faster than most people.
Well, I had to slow down for that, which actually did my head in as well.
Yeah.
And it had like 17th century Italian poets in it. I was thinking, how do you pronounce that? Because then there's loads of words you write, but you can't pronounce either because you don't often use them, do you? So you think, geez, you have to, YouTube will tell you some of them, but not all of them. Yeah. So anyway, it took me ages, and I went to my mate's house, and he did a book about the airline industry and how corrupt it is, basically. Yeah. And when he tells you stuff, you never want to get in a plane again. You realise pilots fly in and fly out, and they're not meant to tell you that. There's lots of stuff that's quite dangerous to do, and he cut every corner possible. So he did a book about it, and he played me the audio book, and I was going, wow, that sounds amazing. I mean, your voice, the way you've done it is, your voice sounds really pure and perfect. And he said, it's not me. He AI'd it. You just put it. He said you speak to this thing for about 3 hours. It learns your voice.
Wow.
Then you input the book, and it just does it for you. And it's goes, wow, that's just completely mad. But saying that, maybe because I'm old school, but I'd actually still prefer to do the 4-month version with the mistakes in it, you know. And I was thinking that in culture, in 20, 30 years' time, the mainstream will all be AIs. It's like most people go to a Hollywood blockbuster and watch a car chase, which is kind of AI anyway, isn't it? And that's what's most people like watching films. But then there's an undercurrent, people go and watch art films at home or something. So in the future, the arenas will be full of like AI sort of classic bands or whatever. And the small gigs will be full of people who just want to see human beings on the stage. And that'll be what alternative music will actually become a physical manifestation of culture as well. But I don't mind both in a sense. You know, I don't mind the idea of going to see the Rolling Stones 1967 Brian Jones and if it's a completely fake version. That would be entertaining. But I want to have both. I don't want it to just be one. I don't want the disaster capitalist to dictate 100% of all the culture. There has to be another bit which they can't get their hands on, isn't it? Yeah.
I don't know. I'll push back a little bit on this one. I don't know what other people think, but there is something inherent in us being human about creating social experiences that maybe AI won't be able to replicate, and we'll still have that innate need to want to gather collectively to experience it.
Oh, no,
as much as I don't like having to sit behind Gary from Warrington with his mobile phone shouting at James going, do sit down, then he can go home and get the last.
Well, that'll happen because you'll still be in the room with people. I mean, the audience won't be AI because you can't make any money out of that.
Yeah.
So they still need, I mean, they don't really want you there, but they still have to get you in there to get your money off you, wouldn't they? Yeah. Unless they get to a point where it's all in your front room. Yeah, which could be a thing, a bit like Deliveroo culture will be there, won't it? Where you can get run over by a 30-mile-an-hour electric bike.
So you spoke earlier, we made an allusion to SJM, which stands for, it's the name of the business run by a guy called Simon Moran, who started out wandering around Manchester with a carrier bag full of leaflets, leaving them in shops and hairdressers and stuff, promoting gigs. And a lot of his team were on the entertainments committee at the University of Manchester when I was there in the 80s. Really interesting group of people, and they're now it's another great Manchester musical success story. They're one of the leading live entertainment businesses in the world. You know, they're promoting the Oasis tour.
Which is great, isn't it? Because it's an
ecosystem, isn't it?
You could argue that Manchester is probably, I mean, London has the main offices of all the music business, but I think Manchester probably is the main music city in the country now. And that's not just because I happen to live here. I'm not from Manchester, so I don't have to wave and flag for it that way around. But but I think when you actually look at the facts and the amount of venues that are here, the amount of stuff that goes on, and the amount of people like SJM that are actually in the city, it's definitely become. I think London, because it's so big, there's no discernible kind of communal kind of idea of culture there, and also because it's more about money. I think London as well, and it's a money city. It's probably the richest city in the world, and it's about money, and it's good at shuffling bits of money around. That's what it does, isn't it?
Yeah.
Whereas Manchester's got this other thing going on, hasn't it? And I think when you bump into people in Manchester, you talk about music, don't you? Yeah. When I see my friends in London, they talk about their rents and their 3 jobs. Now they can't go out. Oh, I can't go. It's too far away. It's just like, and you know, all those cliches are actually true. You go, what your neighbours like? And they go, neighbours? I don't know. What weird questions that? You know. Yeah. Whereas here, you kind of know everybody, don't you? Yeah.
Well, you certainly know everybody in the music world around Manchester. So let's talk a little bit about SJM and how that all started and what sort of. Because what's interesting to me, so there's a band that my eldest son got into when he was 15 called Blossoms, right, from Stockport, and they were signed to SGM. They didn't seek a record deal. They got a record deal eventually, although their last album they self-published it effectively. But they got an artist management company to look after them and get them. And that's a really interesting dynamic for how the music industry's changed,
Yes.
isn't it? About having management that got you on festival bills lower down to build up your.
Well, these days, I
experience.
don't think record labels are as important. You know, when we were starting in bands, it was a be all and end all because they controlled everything. But record sales aren't the main part anymore, are they? Because it's now lives and merchandise, isn't it?
Yeah.
But that change, things, they're never static, you know. But signing to something like SGM does make sense, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And it wasn't Simon that directly managed him. It was Conrad Murray who works with Simon. He's an absolutely brilliant manager, actually. And like nowadays, a lot of managers, I mean, there was a classic, you know, the 50s, 60s, 70s managers are very creative, but not always in a good way, but sometimes a bad way, but they were creative as well. That kind of died out and managers became more like accountants. But Conrad's actually a manager who's very creative. So a lot of that, there's a brilliant cards that they played in it, like the Stockport thing, and doing the gigs in the pub called Blossoms, you know, and I'm doing that little, you know, that little TV series thing and stuff like that. That's all Conrad, you know, the brilliant ideas that he comes up with, which makes the bands sort of like the Stockport Monkeys or something, which is really cool, you know, and it plays around the idea of being a band and makes it kind of fun and interesting little stories that go around it. Because a lot of thing about bands is the stories actually often can be more interesting than music. Not just saying that's not just Blossom, but a lot of the other bands as well. A lot of bands just think, well, it's all about the music, and it's not. It's never always been just about the music, has it? It's all about the closing where the story goes around and the myth, the Robin Hood myth, whatever it is, you know, that can be as entertaining as music. And a good manager understands that, don't they?
Yeah. And that whole flip about we talked about pricing earlier, the whole, I'm thinking back, my tickets that I bought to see the Jam or the Cure or whoever it was at Lancaster University with my pocket money from doing a milk round for my dad would have been £3.
Yeah, but have you kept the tickets?
Yeah, of course.
Do you know what they're worth now? Yeah, they're worth a fortune. So, like the Sex Pistols Anakin UK tour, the one, well, this is specifically, you know, a collectible because he got 25 dates, only did 4. So there's tickets for the gigs that didn't happen, and they're worth £500 each. Yeah, and then you look at the price of the tickets, 50p. It's like, so even those gig tickets there would be worth 10, 20 quid, which I think is insane. I mean, I don't collect stuff at all. I've got friends who collect everything, and when you're in a band, collectors keep you on the road. I mean, for a band, collectors are the best thing because you can do lots of versions of a record, lots of cool stuff on the merch, and everyone's happy because people like collecting it. It makes them, you know, and I think that's important. But I don't collect stuff, so I don't have that kind of collecting gene, you know. And the stuff I've thrown away is probably worth an absolute fortune. Although there's a few things that I somehow survived the culls and I've got and thought, wow, but is that? I've got an Oasis demo that's worth about 10 grand. So I think, can I sell that? I'm not sure what to do with it, you know. But so that's what they work on, that model as well. You know, that's like a lot of bands working that space.
My point was, it was about the same price to buy ticket gig and buy an album, unless it was by Crass, because they always used to pay no more than £2.99.
Yeah, I bet they regretted that.
Yeah,
with the record,
even as anarchists, they could do it.
People tour to sell the record.
Yeah,
and now
that's
people,
right.
People put the record out to advertise the tour, don't they? But then that'll change again. You know, it's not. There's you know, now it's because it's streaming, it's really important and stuff like that. I mean, it's a criminal activity, isn't it? I mean, the people run streaming as a way to listen to music. It's completely brilliant, isn't it? But Daniel Ek is a criminal, isn't he? You know, the idea that he earned more money last year than what's this mad statistic than Taylor Swift, Oasis, somebody else put together. He earned more money by basically having a website that shares the music. That is not right, is it? Yeah. But I mean, you can make money out of Spotify. There is a model that makes money out of it, but it's not as much as he's making out of it. Yeah. See, that's an example of disaster capitalism, isn't it?
Yeah, completely.
And you see him talking, you think, you know, when people in music, you try to imagine them going home and listening to music, and you think, he doesn't, does he? Yeah. He just goes home and looks at his bank statement, doesn't he? Feels good.
Yeah, right. Shall we open for questions? We've been talking for 40 minutes. It's been amazing. We haven't even touched on kind of meeting Kurt Cobain. We haven't talked about some of the other interviews we've done. We've not even given that much of a plug for your fantastic book, which got 5 stars in the Tameside Reporter by me, the Art of Darkness. And we talked about your Oasis book, but we've still got lots of time to sit here. Who'd like to ask a question of John Robb? John Not would like to ask the first question?
I suppose it ties into the whole, we're moving into a world where things like Spotify, rights management, etc. Whereas punk was very much a kickback that it was trying to be, told what to do. Do you think there's going to be a similar movement in terms of rights and publishing where we go back to bands just managing it all for themselves, which I think Paul Heaton does. He's in the room, I think he said, when the ticket prices are arranged.
I think there's a misunderstanding of punk, really. You know, I was the same. I actually thought the Pistols and the Clash were all just doing it themselves and they were just getting their clothes from Oxfam like we were, but it wasn't really like that, was it? They were just brilliant show business. You know, they had managers telling them what to do, didn't they? And, you know, if you read England's Dreaming, the book, John Savage's book about the Pistols, it's one of the greatest. You don't even have to like the Pistols to like that book. It's a brilliant pop culture book. And then I realised in the end from reading books like that that all successful bands are basically not it's not a 4-piece, it's a 20-piece. You know, there's somebody making the clothes for them. There's somebody making the managerial decision for them. There's somebody at the record label gets what they're doing and plays the game along with them. It's all smoke and mirrors, you know. So the bands that came after those bands, the bands like people like my age, we were the ones who thought this is all DIY. And DIY was brilliant because it got you in and it made you do it. But it was no way to actually deal with basically what is the behemoth of show business, because it's not run like that, is it? You know, they just think you're just mad, noisy people over here somewhere. We'll just get all the other stuff over here. So punk, I think what punk said and what it actually did were two completely different things. I mean, the Clash had a manager. The Clash had somebody on the road, on tour, that making their clothes for them every night. You know, it was never like that in my world. I know her, what she called her. Yeah, but she had a sewing machine on the road, and they would say, we want a pair of white trousers with these sort of pockets, and she'd make them in the sound check. So,
in order to be successful, you have to play the game still.
in a sense, but is there anything wrong with the game? Because it's exciting showbiz, and it made you feel completely brilliant when you were there, weren't you? You know, people always think people think it was like Robin Hood or something, but it wasn't like that at all. You know, but I don't really mind that when I found that out, it didn't ruin it all for me. But I think there's always people taking back the means control, isn't there, in every sort of aspect of society. So when I say the thing where eventually it'll be, you know, a very AI disaster capitalism culture, there'll still be people underneath that making their own culture. And often that's where the best ideas are, isn't it? Because people, when I wrote the goth book, actually a lot of people in the goth book were making the stuff themselves, like bands like Bauhaus, so like probably the most influential goth band, even though they hate the term, came out of a town called Northampton, and they didn't have anybody helping them, and they're the 4 weird kids in the town who made a fantastically weird band without any help, really. You know, so it does go on, you know, but a lot of the mainstream stuff is all the machinations of the mainstream and things. There's always a reaction as well. I don't think there'll ever be a punk again. I don't want them to be a punk again, because it wouldn't be punk, would it? It'd just be a carbon copy of something that happened before. There's always kickbacks and stuff. There's always a bunch of kids in town doing something against the mainstream or just doing their own thing on their own terms. I bump into someone, I go out there, I'll probably bump into someone on the way home, somebody, you know, and so it never goes away. And it's not one of those things that only happens in your generation as well, because people my generation always go, oh, back in the day. You go, no, you've got it all wrong. But, you know, this is a little side thing to that, but people, when they get older, think, they always say this, every time I put a new band up or out on socials, people go, music nowadays is not proper songs, and all this kind of stuff. I go, do you honestly think in 30,000 years of human beings making art, probably way longer than that actually, that the only time people actually made any good art was when you were 16? It's just mad, isn't it? It's just a mad thing to think, isn't it? If you were, well, actually it's younger now, because 16 used to be the age where people got completely obsessed with pop culture, but now it's about 10, isn't it? And for those kids, whatever they're listening to, and their parents don't get it, and the parents, because that's the other thing people always say, they go, oh, you know, it used to be, parents didn't get the music, the kids' music my kids listen to, I totally understand it, and I really hate it. You go, well, that's just like your parents, isn't it? It's just saying, it doesn't ever change, does it? And what it means to those people, you don't understand, and that's cool, isn't it? And that kind of goes on forever, doesn't it?
Well, people smashing up records because they thought this was a black man's thing.
Oh, yeah. Or if you ever, I don't know if anybody ever went to Probe Records in Liverpool, which this is an old story, but remember a band Dead or Alive with Pete Burns? It looked amazing, didn't he? Like, and he was in Liverpool, walking around Liverpool dressed like that in 1980, and people like walking down the Dock Road, really rough down that road there, and people going, Look at you, you weirdo. But Pete Burns is about 6'2", pretty hard.
Yeah.
And he's standing there going, "You got a fucking problem, mate?" And I go, "Not really, no." And he'd be painted yellow with a nappy on, with red things in his eyes. The next week you saw him dressed like a Native American warrior and like that. But if you went in Probe Records, which is the main punk indie shop in Liverpool, you went up to the counter with a record, he'd go, and often he'd go, "You're not buying that, it's shite," and he'd smash it on the counter. So when we went down from Blackpool, I was the only one who dared to go to the counter with the records and the fanzines to go to the counter, and everyone else like hiding, but what's he going to fucking say? Because he was going, "Oh, shit, that," you know, and like, so that was like the ultimate.
Yeah. What did he say to you?
Oh, he go, well, actually, he didn't really say that much to me, like, but he would obviously didn't like some of the records that we were buying, which is, it wasn't his shop, he just worked shop. The bloke who owned the shop stood behind him just laughing. You know, just think it's really funny because he was a kind of mad old hippie guy, Jeff, who used to run the shop, is sadly dead now, but like, you just think this is just a really great piece of punk rock theatre, which it kind of was in a way, wasn't it? Yeah. And everyone you speak to in that generation has that story. I was speaking to Gavin Friday, who's in a band called Virgin Prunes and works at U2. So they had this is another very punk rock story, but in Dublin in 1977, it was a very religiously oppressed city. You know, there was good stuff going on before because Thin Lizzy, but they all had to move to London, didn't they? So Gavin and U2 used to walk around with dresses on, eyeliner, and walk down the streets of Dublin. They created this imaginary village called the Lipton Village, which I think made a great film, actually.
Wouldn't it just?
And they decided to have two bands in the village. One was the Virgin Prunes, which is Gavin's band, and one was a band called U2. And U2 would be like the straight bands, and Virgin Prunes would be the freak bands. And that's how it all played out forever. So U2 become the biggest band in the world. Yeah. But they're still friends, and they still have the Lipton Village. So Gavin is U2's art director. But the reason I mention that is because he used to get the ferry to Liverpool because you couldn't get the punk records in Dublin. So you couldn't get any punk records then. This shows how much culture and everything's everywhere now. So he collects 50 people's 35p's each, or whatever, to buy, and a little shopping list. And he would go to Probe, and he had the same story: go in there and buy the records. And Gavin, I mean, the Virgin Prunes were amazingly freaky bands, but like Pete Burns was number one, wasn't he? So he'd go like, "Jesus, look at him, he looks so amazing." And Pete Burns go, "You're not buying that, it's shite." And he'd have the same story about that as well. You know, it'd be shite if it'd been out for 2 weeks. "Oh, you're not still into that, are you?"
Fantastic. Right, we'll take some more questions if you want to ask something. Yeah. Sorry about the Welsh reference. Was that you who took offence?
Personally offended. Actually, you mentioned obviously about modern online streaming now and how things have changed compared to how you used to go down and the only thing you could access was what was in the record shop. Do you think that the access to global music now, different languages, different countries, do you think that is going to improve things? Do you think music's going to keep crossing those borders, or do you find that people still stick to sort of what is safe and what they know? Do you have any thoughts about the global music? If you found anything interesting that
I mean, before the world went insane, I was going to lots of things in Russia actually, and they got an amazing music scene there. So last time I was there, was it 2019 or 20, and it was amazing what's going on there. Before, I mean, it's awful now, but then it was the most hipster place in Europe, and Moscow was the new Berlin. It was slow. It was about to change.
I thought that was Stockport.
But it had all these cool areas in it and loads of amazing bands. There's a band there called Short Paris. So actually, I don't know how they're doing this, but they're touring soon over here. And they were very political, and they sang in Russian. And they have they're kind of got post-punk sounds, but they have their own twist on it. And they made all these very political videos. And when Russia went insane and the war started, they were still touring around Russia. And I was realising, obviously, the KGB, whatever it's called nowadays, it's the FSB, yeah. They obviously aren't that bright, are they? They didn't get the cultural nuances. Like in the 50s when people used to do radio shows on BBC and sneak slang in, and the BBC didn't understand what they were saying. This must be what's going on here or something. Because if you get arrested in Russia for anti-war stuff, you get 15 years in jail. And they were doing anti-war songs very poetically. So there was a whole raft of these bands. It was an amazing music scene there. I've been going to a lot of these events in Europe. There's a great one in Estonia, where the music in Estonia is like mind-blowing now. Like, it's a lot of electronic music, a lot of like weird dark folk music from the forests, a lot of all this stuff going on, and all in their own language as well. So the Anglo-American pop axis, which dominated pop culture from the 50s up to about 10, 15 years ago, is fading in a sense, as each country's got its own culture now. So the first time we toured Germany in the 80s, there was hardly any German bands. There was obviously a band called Einstein's Ende Neubart, and there's a few other bands, but they were like novelties in a way, and they sang in German. It's like, wow. But now you go to Germany, virtually the whole top 40 is German bands. Saying that though, Anglo-American music is still really popular. You know, it's like, you know, a lot of these bands don't come out of Germany, don't cross over. Maybe like Rammstein's about the only one to cross over worldwide, but a lot of the others don't really cross over. Whereas we still have bands that somehow make sense in other cultures, maybe because of the history, maybe because of tradition, maybe because we're actually good at it. I think we think in Britain we're really good at pop culture, which is mad because all our governments completely ignore it, make it really difficult for us to do, don't they? But then I was looking. I was thinking Arctic Monkeys, like, to me, they're big, aren't they? You know, I thought they're a big cult band. You know, they play in England, they'll play a big arena gig. So I looked up their world tour, and they're playing like Mexico, Philippines. I was thinking, what do they play in the Philippines? It's something stadium. I thought, well, how big is that? And I looked it up, it's like 80,000 people. And they were sold out this world tour to 80,000 people all everywhere. And I think so. British music, even if we don't think so, is still really popular around the world, which is something. I'm not patriotic, but it's something that makes me feel good. That here's something we're really good at, innit? And that makes me feel proud. But I think because we're very good at being a multicultural filter. So no matter how many times you see someone like Nigel Farage and all those fuckers on telly, you know, like going on about stuff, I think most people in this country are pretty tolerant. And also we're very good at embracing other cultures and making versions of it that fit. You know, we've done it a long time, haven't we? Like Manchester especially, and you walk around Manchester and it's a really multicultural city and nobody ever notices, which is the strength of it, isn't it? It's not even an issue. It's not political, social, cultural. It just is. That's how it is, isn't it? And we're good at mixing all sorts of stuff. So we come up with all these kind of hybrid musical forms that are very us. Like, you know, punk maybe started the Ramones, but we made it to something else. Grime, maybe a lot of the people in that are sort of the Nigerian diaspora, but they do it in a very kind of British way as well. So it's you know, when it's really good, like you know, like Skepta, people like that. It's got British themes in the lyrics, hasn't it? It's about going to a cafe and stuff like that, which we're really good at as well, aren't we? The you know, like the mundanity of life made into art is such a British thing, isn't it? You know, like when it rains, you can write a great song about it, and all that, and it's respected all over the world, and people like it. I think that's a good thing in it. I think, you know, look, culturally, because Americans dominate everything, don't they? Else, you know, like film or whatever, it's hard to get in there. But here's something that we can have that's ours as well, isn't it? So I think there's two things going on there. I think the rest of the world now makes its own pop culture, but there's still a lot of respect for our culture as well. And also because America's so massive, they tend to have a lot of big acts as well. But a lot of our acts make it. Well, I think it made it easier because we spoke old American, didn't we? So we had the language thing, and then we had the Beatles, who probably, whether you like them or not, culturally they're probably the biggest, most important pop group of all time. That's always going to be a door opener for British culture, the soft power of British culture, isn't it? Yeah. I think I wandered off a bit there, but
That's great. Great. Yes.
Do you think the route into music and being an artist is harder now with how hard it is to support yourself on a minimum or no wage?
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
Versus you can make it work like doing odd jobs or paper round and also be a band, whereas there's no time or money to do that now.
Single greatest thing in my period was the dole, you know, because you didn't get paid very much on the dole, but it gave you could survive on the dole. You could spend 10 years on the dole, honing down what you did. So all that generation of bands had the dole to get their thing together. So you had bands who didn't have rich parents, which basically now you have to have. It's a very middle class occupation being in a band. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, there's nothing wrong with Coldplay being able to be Coldplay. You know, it's like maybe their parents helped when they started and all those bands. That's fine. I don't have any problem with that at all. You know, everybody, music is for everybody. It should be anybody, even if you're in the royal family, if you're talented, you should be able to make music. You know, but maybe get rid of the royal family while you're doing it. But the problem is that a lot of kids in the States, a mile away from here, can't sustain themselves to a point where they can make the music. So we're losing a lot of really good people. That's actually a reflection of society, though, because a lot of people in that kind of state over there, a lot of smart kids don't get a chance to come into the city and do stuff as well. So it's not just a music problem, it's a society problem. It's also how stupid capitalism is, because you can't tap into the raw talent and it's got on its feet because you want to keep it all to itself, doesn't it? The whole Nepo baby thing. Because you get to a certain age when you're watching, I don't really watch telly much, but when you watch, you think, I can remember their mum and dad being on the telly. It's not a genetic sort of talent in your DNA to be a TV presenter, is it? You know, I think that's wrong because it's locking other people out. So we need to open up. So whatever jobs you're doing in here and what stuff you do in your lives, whatever, I think it's good to be aware of that, you know, that there's other people out there who've got really good ideas and really good stuff that are actually not just being, oh, wouldn't it be nice if it helped everybody? It's actually good for you as well, isn't it? So it's a two-way kind of process, and music has to be very aware of that. And there are people in music aware of that as well, and how do we have those people included into this thing, you know?
Answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, it's like
I mean, Ringo's.
sensible. It's
I mean, Ringo,
conversation, isn't it?
the best drummer in the 1960s was Ringo Starr, and people always argue about this, you know, because he's got a wacky name and he always played it down a bit. But he came from the Dingle in Liverpool, which is like, it was a pretty rough area in them days, you know, and he ends up. But the Ringo Starr of now is what we say probably wouldn't get that chance, you know. So that's wrong with our culture, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
About universities as well, that the old student union culture, bars and
Yeah.
students spending most of the days at bars, swims and barrels, but it's a very different dynamic.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, there's a lot more of them as well. University used to be almost an elite.
Yeah, like you say, like people used to play the club venues, and then you step up to the university venues because they were paying quite a lot of money as well, wouldn't they, and things. But then that was a very old school argument, wasn't it? Because some student unions wouldn't let the locals in, and that was something. Another little debate these go for years. Now that debate doesn't exist anymore because the student unions don't have gigs on, do they?
Yeah,
So,
it's true.
but I mean, I suppose most students. When I went to Stafford Poly, which is not a great example of, it's not Cambridge, Oxbridge, is it? But but they kicked me. I only went to one lecture and they kicked me out, and 40 years later they gave me a degree. So I went last year, and you had to dress up in this medieval orange outfit and get your degree.
Did you really? Right.
Yeah. Then I said to my mum, who's still alive, I said, "Look, I've got my degree yet. I can get a proper job now."
It was Blackpool Orange as well. Or
Yeah,
tangerine.
Yeah. But you're right, yeah, because the student union circuit was important then. But it changed. But I think students now, like, they like different. Well, also, I think if you're a student now, you can't afford to fuck about, because then you could fuck about, then go on the dole. You know, then go on with your band. You know, that's what I did. I only went for a year. I went there for a year because you got slightly more of the grant you got with the dole, so I could just do my band thing there. Yeah. So like it's different. It's harder now. So I live in Hume. It's a student area, and sometimes, you know, on the weekends it's noisy. And the rest of the week is quiet. There was a petition in my block to tell the students to be quiet, and I said, I'm not signing that. It's ridiculous. I don't think they're loud enough. If I was 18 or 19 now, I'd be going crazy every night. You know, like the state the world's in.
Yeah.
I would spend the day getting your degree. Everyone should get their degree, but at night time, go crazy. You young, do mad shit. Yeah.
James, do you have your hand up for a question?
Yeah, like one of the things I love about you, John, is there's like all these sort of little controversies that you just sort of dispel. Like, you know, I love how you sort of have the glass half full approach to seemingly all the gigs, phones at gigs, people chatting. I remember last time we talked about Hacienda, isn't it overdone? You were like, yeah, but it's brilliant, isn't it? And it felt like I felt last time we got permission to just enjoy loads of stuff. Is there anything that really annoys you?
Yeah. I think disaster capitalism, obviously, and the royal family, you know, the way they perpetuate that, you know, it's ridiculous. What a stupid way to run a country. It's absolutely mental, isn't it? That the celebration of our culture is through this family, isn't it? Where we all do good stuff, isn't it? It's not just. It's great what's happening in Australia. I think that's so funny, isn't it? I think
in what sense?
When Charles is going around Australia and all the governors of each state won't go and meet him. And now the Daily Mail's having a meltdown about it. I think it's hilarious, isn't it? You know, I think the idea, they don't represent us, do they? That's the thing. We're different. They're there and we're over here, aren't we? We do loads of good stuff, so why is he our representative? Anybody in this room could represent this country way better than he could, because they're more in touch with what goes on in this country. That annoys me. And the Tories annoy me. And
still, even though we got rid of them.
Yeah, well, but they'll come back, won't they? In fact, it'll actually get worse as well. The state of the world annoys me. All those things annoy me. But I think you can't beat the system by being cynical. I think you have to be cynical at a certain level where you don't believe everything's fed to you. But optimism is a powerful thing. You have to believe you can make good change in the world, don't you? So some days you don't feel like it, but you vibe yourself up to go and make those changes, don't you? And I think that's important, isn't it? They want you to be cynical and go, oh, what's the point? Nothing's ever going to change. That's what they want you to think, because you're not going to change anything now, are you?
Isn't it called pessimism of the intellect, optimism of the will?
That's a much better way of putting it. Yeah. He's a proper journalist, you can tell.
Antonio Gramsci, Italian Marxist, 1926.
Do you remember Tony Wilson? I used to bump into Tony all the time on the street because he only
lived
over
opposite,
there.
didn't he?
We used
Yeah.
to always have a massive argument about music. And Tony, and I love Tony, we all love Tony, but Tony would always do quotes, but he was getting them slightly wrong. But I didn't know what, I thought he's got that wrong, but I don't know what the quote is to know what the right one is. Because he'd been to Oxbridge, we didn't do quotes at Stafford Poly. Well, maybe we did, but I only went to one lecture.
But the great irony, of course, is everybody remembers Tony Wilson by quotes he didn't actually say.
Oh yeah, no, that's true, isn't it? Yeah.
They're actually written-
Manchester, we do things differently here, wasn't him? Was
No,
it?
it was Steve Coogan playing Tony / Alan Partridge in 24-Hour Peep.
Which he did brilliantly, actually.
He did,
Really
yeah.
caught it, didn't he?
Yeah. He did. Carry On Factory Records, Steve Morris calls that.
That's why it was called it.
Do you?
Yeah. Has he got that from me?
Well,
Because I thought it's like a carry-on film.
I'll let you,
was
the drummer of New Order, fight that one out between them. Right, brilliant. John, you've been a great guest at Freelancers and Friends. James, did you want to wrap things up at all with any closing remarks while he sprints around the building? We haven't even touched on so many different things you've done. You've written an amazing book about the Stone Roses. You're one of the first people to meet and interview, as a British journalist, interview Nirvana.
I was the first.
The first.
I didn't know I was the first.
Yeah.
But I rang him up at his mum's house. But then we went to New York 6 months later to interview them when they were supporting a band called Tad on tour. And we got to the flat and it was about the size of where this little stage bit. And they're all on the floor. Tad about 6 foot, big guys. They'd taken up space. Nirvana in that corner. And then we said, where we staying? The press agent said, you're staying here. So we had to squidge in the floor. No sleeping stuff under my coat with a rucksack as my pillow. 4 days were in there. And we saw Nirvana, a 4-piece, and this is before Dave Grohl joined, original drummer. Saw them play this amazing gig to 20 people in New York where they trashed all the gear, smashed it all up. And we interviewed and Tad with the front cover piece and Nirvana, the little cutaway. Wow. Even though I say, no, it's got to be Nirvana. They're going to be pretty big, these. But I thought the terms of big was the same as the label. The label was Sub Pop. And Sub Pop said, they've got to be big Nirvana, as big as Sonic Youth. And that was the ceiling. No one got past that in that music. And of course, a year and a half, 2 years later, Teen Spirit comes out, which is still one of the greatest records, I think. Yeah. I know everyone's heard it 8 million times. You go, oh, not that again. No. But then you listen and go, God, that's amazing record. Amazing. Lyrically, sonically, the way he sings it, what it's about, the whole thing. It's just really exciting. They become the biggest band in the world and a cultural game changer. They changed the culture of America, didn't they? I mean, that's how powerful music can be, isn't it? To this day, the echoes that are going on, but there's no idea that was going to happen at the time, you know.
Incredible.
Yeah, because I'm not an A&R, I just like stuff. I mean, there's the same issue with Sounds, which the newspaper was writing for at the time, where I did that little cutaway Nirvana interview. You could probably find an interview with some bands like Bogshed or whatever he loves, that no one's ever heard of, but who are totally genius bands, you know. Because I'm not a record label, it's not my problem if they make it or not. I want them to make it. I get excited when the bands I love make it because I think it makes the world a better place. I'm not one of those. I'm not a musical snob. I hate that thing like, oh, I like music you've never heard of. You know, you have to understand this. I hate that kind of thing, don't you? It's just like
I do.
Because music you don't have to understand. You listen to it, you go, fuck, that's great, or you listen to it and go, I don't get that, but you know what? I'm gonna keep listening to that and I'll get it in the end. There's stuff like that as well. And also, some music like is just. It's totally uncool, isn't it? Like you just love it anyway, don't you?
Well, I did a radio show for 3 years, and our unwritten rule on it was no such thing as a guilty pleasure.
Oh, I hate that idea.
We just played stuff, and we called it music therapy because it was Sunday night. And
the guy came up with guilty pleasure, Sean. It was a piss take.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, because he didn't think that anyway. He did it, and then it became this thing, and he was doing guilty pleasure nights for 3,000 people going to listen to him play ELO and stuff like that. It was like it was a parody that he was doing, wasn't it? And but then people started to take it really seriously. Oh, you can't like that. It's like who's
what you want?
Who's anybody to tell anybody else what they're meant to like?
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, punk was terrible for that. I mean, as much as I love punk, it was always like, oh, you can't like that band. You have to like this band. That band's not a proper band. It's like, oh, shut up. Yeah.
I'm really, really happy and pleased that these guys have done so. Please, would you thank Michael Taylor and John Robb?
Oh, Michael. Yeah.